I'm currently heading out to Backyard Bike Shop, and it's about a 20-mile ride in. I'm now living out in Northumberland. Just better access to amazing roads and beautiful single track. I'm heading in to chat to Nick to get a pro bike mechanics perspective on what I should be taking on a bikepacking trip. Hopefully you can get something out of it, and yeah, I've got a pretty good idea, but it's always good to get a second point of view.
Hey Joshua, welcome to the new Backyard Bike Shop. Well, almost new, it's not finished yet, but James is busy building shelves over there. Stock needs to go up. New tool wall needs to go up. But yeah, it's a much bigger space. Got seating over there now. Cafe, restaurant, bigger menu. So yeah, mega heaters, so it's nice and warm in the winter. So yeah, it's just getting there.
And what we're doing today?
Well, we're going to try and talk through all the tools and spares you might need for one of your bikepacking adventures, which hopefully you're not carrying all of this in one go, but I suppose this is the worst case scenario.
So I've laid out here in front of Nick all the tools that I think would possibly go in my bags for a bikepacking trip, and I'm going to get Nick to talk me through them and get rid of some, add some.
Yeah, no wonder your bike weighs like 30 kilos. There's a lot over here, so I don't know where to start exactly, but I suppose we can go from one side to the next. It's probably the easiest, because there's not one thing that's more important than the other. The main thing I would say is think about your trip, where you're going, how long you're going for, is it going to be really hilly, and also your kit, because obviously it's fairly personal to what kind of bike you're riding, because obviously different bikes will use different stuff. So first main important thing is, if you're going on a long trip and middle of nowhere, spare lights, always worthwhile carrying them. Don't rely on just spare batteries, because if one dies because it's broken and you're in the middle of nowhere at night, a rear light is essential. Next thing is basics, tire inflation. Doesn't matter how many spare inner tubes, pump kits, things you have, you want to be able to inflate your tires. So think about, do you need a high pressure pump or a high volume pump? And that'll just depend on whether it's gravel, mountain bike or road tires. Some tires need high pressure and others you just want to pump them up quite quickly. So that's got to play. Another key thing that I gave Josh a few years ago is that, and that's just an adapter to make a PRESTA valve into SHRADER. So you put that on your inner tube. Let's grab this one. And essentially with that on, you can inflate your tire at any petrol garage that's got a compressor or a pump for cars. So it's a get out of jail free. Especially if you've got a puncture with tubeless and you want to top it up really quickly, that works really well. If you're running tubeless, always carry spare valve cores, because they can get clogged up or snapped off or broken. And also obviously make sure you've got a tool that can take it out. Quite a few valve caps from like Lezyne is really good, because that can just screw on to your inner tube when you need it to take the core out or tighten it up. That's quite good. Some inner tubes like Conti actually has removable valve cores as well, and for quite a while out of the factory they were coming quite loose, so people were inflating their tires, taking their pumps off, and the valve cores were coming out. It's very handy to just put them back in. There are other methods. Spare chain links, split links in case you need to put a chain back together, or snap one or snap your chain, but obviously make sure that what you've got matches your chain on your bike, because it's pointless if you've got an 11 speed one and you're running 12 speed. Next bit of tools is tire levers. Tire levers are essential to get your tires off if you had a puncture or you need to swap a tire. Invest in a good set. Don't always go for the smallest just because the smaller doesn't make it better. If it doesn't work, completely pointless. You've got multi-tool. A good quality multi-tool is going to have quite a lot of tools, but also check to make sure that it's got all the bits you need for your bike. So if you need a T20 or a T25, make sure your multi-tool's got that on there, because if you don't have it, it could be a completely pointless multi-tool. This one's got a chain splitter as well, which is useful for long bike packing. I don't use it for local gravel, but if I was to do a long trip, that's essential, because if you snap a chain, that'll be an incredibly handy tool. which you can't really bodge easily enough with anything else.
And that's a Lezyne tool.
That's a Lezyne tool, yeah. The other thing, if you're doing a really long trip, like your China trip or in the middle of Africa, spare spokes. Once again, make sure you get the right length and type of spoke for your wheels. And obviously don't pack these things in if you don't know how to replace a spoke, because it's completely pointless. So before you just pack everything in, be sure you know how to use it. With the spokes, you're going to need a spoke key. Some multi-tools have them on, but just check.
Has this got a spoke key?
Yes. So this is Lezyne split link pliers. They're quite good. You get a few different models, but that's quite a good tool because you can keep all your spare split links in there. So that'll just clip in. It's magnetic. And you can also, it's got a spoke key on it. It's got a rotor tring, so if you bend your rotor for some reason, you can tie it, and it's actually got a bottle opener as well. So something like that, like a versatile multi-tool for that is quite good. Essential bit of kit is pliers, especially if you're out in nowhere. If you're doing a massive trip, yes, you could possibly take a bigger Leatherman, but once again, just be sure if you're going to different countries, you don't want to be cycling around with a knife if you're not allowed to have one, so obviously just make sure about that. This is one I recommended for you after you did, was it All Points North last year?
Yeah.
And you got disqualified for not being able to get a valve out. That's essential because it's tiny little pliers, it's really light, doesn't take a lot of space. I carry one of those every day as well.
Link in the description.
I'll put the link down below for all of these things, yeah. And then lastly, obviously we're jumping from valve cores, spare valves. Make sure they're long, just in case you damage one. It's essential to have spare valves. They don't weigh much. Going on from there, tape, I always carry a bit of duct tape or electrical tape, just because you can do a lot with that. You can strap things to your bike, you can kind of patch things up. I've actually fixed an inner tube before with one of them, just to kind of get me home. If you want to go more extreme, you can carry rim tape as well. So in case you need to re-tape your rim. We have seen instances where a nail or something's gone straight through your tire and then punctured the rim tape, which makes your bike almost impossible to set up tubeless again. You can, in that case, fit an inner tube, but once again you want to tape over the hole so the inner tube doesn't just pop when you inflate it. Spare cleats and bolt. The bolts are more important than the cleats almost, because SPD cleats take quite a while to wear out, but people lose bolts and they're quite hard to get hold of. You can't just get a random bolt from a hardware store. You want the ones that are flat on top that's going to fit in there so you can clip in and out again. Spare MECH hangers, once again, make sure that it fits to your bike, because you get different design sizes and they don't just, it's not a one piece fits all. There are people that make universal MECH hangers, but generally speaking, they say universal, wouldn't work on all bikes. So make sure before you get one of these that it's going to fit on your bike. Spare inner tubes. Now, inner tubes come in varying sizes. These are bizarrely the same size inner tube, but one takes up a lot less space. That is a lot more expensive, but it is worthwhile to invest in the Dilitos, or Swald makes a set of them, Pirelli makes them. Just inner tubes that are not going to take up as much space in your bag. They're a lot lighter as well, and they're slightly more puncture resistant.
You've got to be careful with the Dilitos. You can't take them on a gravel bike because they don't blow up like a butyl inner tube will. So butyl inner tube you can put in a gravel tire and it'll stretch.
No, so that's a false statement. So with these things, you need to be careful because you can't inflate them outside of the tire. So if we take this inner tube now, inflate it, it'll inflate in a funny shape and wouldn't work. But if you get a gravel-sized one, you stick it in the tire first before you inflate it, it'll be perfectly fine. You just can't inflate them outside of the tire.
But what about, so on trips,
yeah?
I often take road tubes on a gravel trip because a road tube will fit into a gravel tire. I don't think that'll work in a gravel tire.
Not this one, but you get gravel-sized ones.
Yeah.
I've got them in stock. I can show you.
Yeah.
So obviously it's a bit of a mess in here, but that's a gravel-sized, similar tube to Dilito. That's for my bike. So that's instead of a 650B tire, 2.1 inch. So that's a really, really big inner tube generally. Comparison, that's the difference in size. And the weight is remarkable. So that just makes it a lot easier to carry a spare inner tube. CO2 I would say should be a last resort. With inner tubes they're quite quick, but I would save them. That's for something if you need to seats, tubeless tires, something like that, use them. But it's a lazy tool. That's something you could leave behind and just get away with a good hand pump. But if you're racing or you're in a hurry or something like that, that is a much quicker way of getting your tire inflated. If you're running tubeless, it's not good for the sealant. It will dry it out inside eventually. I've had one customer only using CO2 on his inner tubes, and that's the sealant that I've taken out of his tire.
And that's because of using CO2?
CO2, yeah, it's just essentially rapidly frozen. Yeah, he's done that a few times, but yeah. Yeah, so CO2 should be a last resort. I would only carry it for if I'm in a hurry, but generally it's pumps. It's a lot less wasteful as well, so yeah, and a lot cheaper. Unless you're carrying hundreds of inner tubes, you can't puncture an inner tube again. So always carry some patches or patch kit. If you're running just tubeless, worms to go in to plug your tire if it doesn't seal, it's worthwhile carrying. Also, these Restrap boot kits have saved me quite a few times. You get a massive cut in the tire, scrub a bit of super glue in the middle, cut out a patch, glue it to the inside of your tire, and off you go. This is, yeah, it's an essential bit of kit. I've gone through 2 whole sets of them already in the last 2 years. And that works for tubeless and tubed tires. And back in the day we used to use money. You can use paper money to actually seal, not seal, but to like create a barrier between the inner tube and a cut tire.
And the plastic money is probably even
plastic
better.
Money is better, but
yeah.
that's just worthwhile to carry.
And I'd probably carry that over like a full new tire.
Yes, yeah.
So it's a bit excessive carrying a full tire, whereas that is tiny and you can
yeah.
just put a patch in it. And most of the time it'll be fine.
Make sure you've got a fresh super glue every time you do a long trip, because if you use the super glue a few times, it does get, the caps don't come off easily. Back on that principle, if you're going to use the tubeless, the worms, you need a good plugging tool. So something where you can actually plug the tires with. It's pointless having them without a tool. Some multi-tools have this built into them, so you don't always have to carry a spare. If you plan in advance what you're going to need, you can actually get a few tools that do almost all of it. I personally carry a dyno plug. It's just faster. So it's got 4 darts in there. So it's got spares. You can carry spare darts as well, but this is just a lot easier. When you get a puncture, find out where the hole is, stick it in. As you pull it out, the dart stays behind inside your tire, and that seals it up. You can also, I've had cuts where I've put up to 3 next to each other to seal a cut. Really good bit of kit. Slightly more expensive, but it's much easier. Some people struggle to get enough force to put one of these worms through a tire. That just makes it easier. So always carry that as a backup. It's got 1 larger dart as well if you get a big cut. So that's quite good. Gloves, personally I don't carry gloves. It's nice to have, keeps your hands clean, but when I'm riding out gravel-wise, I'm not really bothered about getting my hands dirty. So obviously that's a personal preference, but it doesn't take much space. If you want to carry it, go for it. Liquids. Want to always try and carry spare sealant as a top one, because you get a massive puncture and lose a lot of sealant. It is worthwhile topping it back up. I tend to carry a small oil bottle every day, just because you forget to lube your chain or it's a very wet ride. You want to, it's squeaking. Squeaking will just annoy you for hours and hours.
Yeah.
Having a bit of lube.
So this is what I use. In comparison.
Yeah, it's much smaller than a.
So these are the 2 sizes.
Yeah.
And
so
I always decant this one into here, and just smaller, more packable.
Chain wipes, disc brake wipes. Generally speaking, I'd say stay as far away from disc brakes, don't touch them if you can avoid it. But obviously if you have messed some oil on it, that will help a little bit, but it'll still squeak. Chain wipes are quite good, just to clean off extra oil, dirt. Just because if your chain keeps staying dirty and you keep adding oil to it, it's just going to weigh out much quicker. To the extremes, spare tire. Generally speaking, I would say, unless you're in a trip in the middle of nowhere, if I cut a tire completely and I can't fix it, I'll ring somebody to come fetch me. I'll come up with another plan. But if you're in a different country, long trip, it might be worth carrying a spare tire. Spare brake pads, and make sure it's got a spare pin as well. It's always handy to carry. It doesn't take up a lot of space, but it's just if you need brake pads, if you lost one, if you damaged one, or if they've worn out for some reason, yeah, it can get you out of a bind. Lastly, straps. Well, not lastly actually, there's a few more. Straps is always essential. You can strap things to stuff. These are quite good. I tend to carry zip ties as well, if you snap a gear cable, a zip ties can get you out of a lot of troubles. I've seen people fix tires that are cut, making them work again using zip ties. Definitely worthwhile. If you're running a bike with gear cables, carry a couple of spare gear cables if you know how to fit them, but it's worth learning before you do a trip into the middle of nowhere. I don't know how you've survived all your trips not knowing anything about fixing bikes, but yeah, I guess
Trial and error.
luck. And then lastly, we've got electronic gears, chargers. Spare battery is worthwhile because it makes it easy. You can just charge without needing electricity, but yeah, carry chargers.
Yeah, this is 20,000 milliamp.
So yeah, I'll charge quite a few batteries. And that's about it. If you've got any other suggestions,
Put them in the comments below.
I wouldn't carry most of these things. I generally get away with that, tie lever, one of them, a tie lever, and I would carry zip ties and oil. That's essentially as far as my spares
That's
go.
for like a day.
Everyday gravel thing, yeah. If I was to do a longer trip with you for quite a few days into the middle of nowhere, where I know I'm not going to be able to get to a shop, I'd obviously pack a lot more.
Yeah.
But for everyday stuff, that kind of gets me around. But obviously you need to, don't have one thing and pack it and leave it the same for every single thing you do. Because every trip's going to have different needs, and different environments, and think about it all before you...
Obviously for longer trips you'll need more tubes than if you were just going for a day.
Yes. You need to feel right if you're on the train right, you know what I mean? So
Breakfast. Nick's breakfast.
those are really nice though.